Yo. So right now it's mid-March, and it is around the time when a lot of students have gotten some results when it comes to which graduate schools they've been admitted to, whether it's like a PhD program or a master's program. In best case scenario, some grad schools send out their admissions as early as mid to late February, and you might have more admissions that trickle in during March and maybe early April. It's possible that you've also been waitlisted to some schools, and in that case, you might have to wait as late as May and maybe June as to whether or not you can get off the waitlist. Because by that period, a lot of students from the first batch of admits have already decided whether or not they want to go to certain schools, and schools will have a better idea on how many positions, spots they have left to admit people off the waitlist. So if you are on the waitlist for some schools you really want to go to, all hope is not lost. All you have to do is just be patient. And I know plenty of people who have, got into the school they really wanted to, who got off the waitlist. And so, just be patient in that case. But for now, right now, you have a certain batch of graduate schools that you may have gotten admitted to, and you're figuring out, what's next. And so, I went through this process myself, and so I thought I'd make this video as sort of a retrospective analysis, maybe giving some advice, some of my thoughts. I'm not trying to push you in any direction necessarily. This is just sort of me talking, and you can just take from it what you will, okay? In the end, it's your decision. Okay, so now that you have your batch of schools, now what? Well, one thing I would recommend that you do is really keep an open mind on all the schools that you've gotten into and not just focus on the top ones that you got into. I know, in my particular case, I got into, the top two schools I really wanted to go. And so a lot of my focus was actually on those two schools as opposed to, the rest of the schools. And I know a lot of you should have done your research before when you were applying to figure out where you wanted to go. But at the same time, you want to keep an open mind and really explore your options, okay? Because there's a lot of really great professors in a lot of these institutions, okay? And believe it or not, where you go to grad school matters a lot more than where you went to college, okay? Academically speaking. Now, why is that? Well, it makes pretty good sense, right? Because if you go to college, you're basically learning the basics, the foundation, right? You're learning basic math, physics, chemistry, liberal arts, all these foundation classes, okay? And that's the subject matter. It's not going to change across different institutions, okay? On the other hand, when you go to graduate school, you're going to be focusing on very specialized topics, okay? Because these topics are specialized, the amount of the pool of people who are knowledgeable in these fields is much smaller, okay? And so certain institutions may have some of these people, and certain institutions may have none of these people, right? And so especially if you're doing a PhD where you're dealing with research, right? You really need to go to a school that has this sort of field available to you as a student researcher, right? Now you might say, yeah, in college, I want to do research, so it does matter where I go, right? And you're right, but in college, research in many cases is more of an extracurricular activity for the student. Whereas when you're in graduate school, doing a PhD, the research is the main thing that you're doing, okay? And classes are the thing that you do on the side. So where you go to school matters a lot, and so you want to pick out, you want to be very careful on where you decide to go in the end, right? It matters way more than, when you were selecting which college to go to. And this goes on to my next point, which is when you're deciding which graduate school to go to, do not be distracted by the ranking of the schools, okay? Rankings can sometimes be misleading when it comes to graduate schools. When I was in high school, I went to a very, very highly competitive high school. They cared a lot about US News World Report rankings, okay? In college, because where you go to college matters less, then you can rely on those rankings to go to whatever school you want. And in the end, it might not matter. Now for grad school, if you focus too much on rankings, sometimes you might go to a higher ranked school, and then once you're there, you realize that the professor that you wanted to work with doesn't do the topic that you're interested in anymore, and now you're stuck, right? You're screwed. You have to decide to change fields or something like that. But it was never a good fit for you to begin with. Now this is something you should have done your research in before applying to grad school, but let's say you're already in, and now you got to make the decision, okay? Don't fixate on just the general rating, right? You want to explore whether or not they actually have the specific program that you're interested in as a grad student, okay? And this will require you paying visits to different schools and talking to the professors as well as the students in their labs, so you can figure out whether or not they actually have a fit for you, okay, in what you're interested in studying. I'm just gonna give you a pro tip for the future because I was not aware of this when I was in high school, but down the line, in the end, people are not going to care about school rankings. Like those magazines, like US News World Report, those magazines that are ranking schools, they're just doing it to sell magazines, okay? In the end, like down the line, when you're in industry or academia as a working professional, like no one's going to ask what school you went to, okay? No one's going to care as long as you do the work properly. Now, if you ever do meet people who sort of judge your worth based on of what school you go to and what ranking it is, you should probably stay away, okay? Like it's just not a big deal. Some of you might not believe me, but in a couple years you'll probably learn. Okay, so here's another thing to make sure of, okay? Make sure that during your second semester or whatever quarter it is when you are visiting graduate schools to keep your schedule more clear, okay? I mean, taking less classes or having less obligations and responsibilities. Because during my senior year, second semester at Berkeley, I was TAing, I had a full course load, and because of that, that contributed to me also visiting less schools, okay? I probably visited my top 2 schools that I wanted to go to, like Stanford and Berkeley, and I visited 1 or 2 schools in the East Coast, and that was it. In retrospect, I really wish I took more time to explore more schools and do the research on like what options I have out there. And not to say I would have like changed my decision necessarily, but it would have been nice to have explored all the options properly. And so this is my advice to you, just to put more thought into it and keep a schedule clear, okay? Now, during your visit days, what should you do in preparation for meeting professors, right? Well, most schools have an option on trying to get you assigned to meet one-on-one with different professors. I know like several of my programs during the visit days, they fly you over and you have a day of meeting students, but they also have these one-on-one slots where you can meet with different professors and ask about their work. Again, the worst thing to happen is if you're doing a research master's program, or if you want to do a PhD and you decide to go to this particular school, whatever grade school, and then you find out that there's no professor that's going to support you in the work on this particular project that you're interested in. And so these visit days, these one-on-ones, are an opportunity for you to confirm that. It might also be an opportunity for you to get an idea on what this certain professor's working styles are. Again, I have an old video on like how to pick a professor. That's not really what I want to cover here, but it's an opportunity for you to get to know the professors. You should, again, talk to the students in the labs if you can. If they're meeting the students might not necessarily be a formal part of the admin weekend, but if you have the bandwidth, you can see if you can try to visit some of the students in the lab just to get an idea on what it's like to work there. In some cases, the professors might even help you in trying to meet up with students in their lab. And so you should take the opportunity when you have it. And again, on visit days, you should also check for some of the other things outside of academics that you probably cared about when you were deciding which college to go to. Like, what is the environment around the university? Is it like a school? Is it like a middle of nowhere? What's the weather like? All these things, they all play a role. And especially if you're doing a PhD where you're stuck there for 5, 6, 7 years, then yes, like you're going to have to worry about these other little things. They're going to help impact the kind of experience you have in graduate school. Okay, so now the next point I want to talk about might be a bit of a surprise to you. And that is, I recommend that in addition, I know you probably spend a lot of effort applying for graduate schools and now you're figuring out where to go. I recommend that in addition to that, you also invest some time in applying for jobs, let's say in industry, just so you can have additional options available to you, and it will give you some more time to think about, it'll give you more doors, okay, available. If you're 100% set on going to graduate school, if you're 100% sure that you want to go to graduate school, then fine, then maybe not bother. But I think at the time it would have been not just like good to have those choices, it would have been a good experience to go through the interviews of applying for a job in industry, okay? Because the next time I had to do these interviews, it was like several years later when I finished my graduate school, like my PhD, when I had to do interviews again, and I just didn't have that kind of experience, which I should have had when I was a senior in college. Okay, honestly, this is like a pretty short video, and I pretty much covered what I wanted to talk about. Hopefully, it's somewhat helpful or interesting. And again, if you ignore everything I say, that's fine. But this is just just us talking, right? Good luck with everything, and see you next time.